Today we're talking about Atomic Blonde, starring Charlize Theron. So, in all honesty, I've always liked Charlize Theron. She really made a good first impression on me in the Italian Job, the remake that Mark Wahlberg was in as well. And I also liked her in Eon Flux, though that didn't receive quite the same amount of praise that the Italian Job remake did. Um, and she was also in Mad Max Fury Road and had a pretty strong role there. But since I haven't seen that yet, that is part of my mission to do so. I won't dote on that, but I've heard good things about that performance as well. So she comes into this um, as this, spy, secret agent kind of thing, and you can pretty much tell that this movie's going uh, for a woman kicking some serious tail, as opposed to chasing it. But she chases it inadvertently as well. But that's just part of her game. Um, it's really hard to talk about this movie without getting into spoilers, so I'll just go through the brief synopsis and my quick thoughts on it and whether or not you should go see it, and then I'll take some time to address the spoilers later. So, in short, she is actually recapping a story that happened, and most of this movie is in sets of flashbacks. But the good news is that the entire movie is not a flashback. At some point during the movie, it switches over and things progress forward with the present timeline. In addition to that set of flashbacks that she has, and then the flashbacks go away altogether, and then the story moves on a bit. Um, but that is one thing I didn't expect coming into this movie, so fair warning. She does a pretty good job throughout this. I gotta be honest with you. I think she's 41, and people say age shouldn't matter, but I'm just telling you that because you wouldn't know that she was 41 if you saw this lady doing this stunts. You wouldn't assume she was like some young buck straight out of college or anything, but you'd think like early 30s maybe. But regardless, she does a fantastic job, and the stunts in this are really cool. And I should mention too that the director of this has been a pretty big time stunts director for many other films. I think it was somewhere around like 70 or 80 films, but definitely the ones such as Fight Club for the stunts, and also some stunts for a variety of movies as well. And this director was also one of the directors for John Wick, which had Keanu Reeves in it. And it has a similar kind of style, though there are plenty of differences between the two. You have Charlize Theron's character um, trying to figure out how to get certain people out of certain scenarios. There's this supposed list that everyone wants that has all the names of these specific agents, and if the list gets into the wrong hands, it could mean that the Cold War doesn't end, and that the Berlin Wall stays up, yada yada yada. And so you're trying to figure out who's on what side and who is playing and who is getting played in this game. I have to admit, towards the end of the movie, I was getting a little irritated, and I won't spoil it, but it did come back full circle, and the ending made sense. Though at the same time, it was a little confusing as to how they got there. But I don't think it's going to leave you completely baffled. I think it's just going to be one of those movies you're like, oh, that's how it ends. Okay. um, Really, the highlight of this movie is the stunts. There were definite scenes of where Charlize Theron comes out victorious, and you expect that, but just the way that she attacks these guys, it's a bit crazy. There were a few crotch shots, so I was like, okay, yeah, that's come to be expected at this point. If you have a female action hero, getting the guy in the balls, okay, sure. But thankfully, those weren't the only kinds of scenes that played out. And then you have this guy who kind of puts himself up as like a drunk hobo, has all these resources and supplies, except he's uh, tied up to one side or the other in terms of having information and being a spy himself. You're trying to figure out throughout the movie, like, what happens with him. You have this girl who comes around and, she takes, like, pictures of Charlize Theron throughout the movie, and then you, like, come to find out more about her. Um, yeah, and more about that later. And you have this interrogation going on, and that's the framing device for this movie. You have Charlize Theron talking um, to this, like, British head or her boss or something like that, and then you have this American played by John Goodman, you know, pretty American. Um, and then you have these two guys that are behind the wall, and probably like dozens of others as well. But the two guys that put her on this assignment in the first place, and we're just trying to figure out, okay, when do the flashbacks play into her present condition, because she has like a black eye at the interrogation, and how does it all tie out? Well, we can talk, and to give the quick synopsis about whether they're going to see this movie, I think it's a good one. I do. Um, the nudity caught me off guard quite a bit. Not because I, you know, really mind, but it's rated R, so it's not really a family feature. But if you're even like a little bit uncomfortable with like more than like a quick slip, you're probably going to be uncomfortable for maybe like, I don't know, like a minute of the movie. It's not frequent, but it happens. So fair warning. Um, they tend to sandwich the F word a lot, which again, it's hard for me to say whether or not I really like get that. I think there were some situations where you could genuinely tell that the character was angry and irritated, and it made sense. And then sometimes you felt like that they were just trying to use the word like four times in the same sentence because they could, because it was rated R. It was one of those kind of things where if used sparingly, the language is effective, and if overused, it just dries out and makes your movie look a tad cheap. But thankfully, it's not a gigantic deterrent, but it happens. But overall, I would say this is a fun movie to go see, especially that kind of action spy thriller. And Charlize Theron kicking some serious ass. Yeah, it's pretty great actually. Um, the story itself isn't really that complicated, and yeah, like I said, there's like twists that come at the end. You kind of wonder if they're needed, but at the same time, it answers questions that come out throughout the movie. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'd go say, go check it out. You probably don't have to pay like the $8 or $10 or however much a movie theater costs, but I would definitely like get it at Redbox. And if you are gonna watch, definitely watch it on a big screen. If it's not a movie screen, at least like put on like your big screen TV or something like that, or even some projector or something like that. It is a fantastic visual, pleaser for sure. Okay, so now on to the spoilers. So when Charlize Theron gets put onto this mission, and her name's Lorraine, by the way, in this movie, these two guys that were behind the interrogation wall had put her on a mission to find this list, and they were in particular looking for this double agent named Satchel. And she was going to go over to Berlin to find Percival, this other guy that's the drunk hobo in the movie. Except, he's like an agent of sorts. And there's a lot of gunfire that happens. She shoots out of, she uses her heel. Of course she does. When she gets out of the airport, and this random car comes up to try to drive her out and kill her. Um, there's a lot of time spent in different bars and nightclubs, and the lighting in this superb. A touch unrealistic, but like I said before, I give it a little bit of a pass, mainly because the atmosphere was a lot of fun. It is a little hard to believe though that she could find this really sweet looking like hotel room or whatever under such short notice. But it's fun. There's this like there's this girl who's actually a Paris agent that is taking a lot of pictures of Theron, and they start talking, and Charlize has this kind of way of looking in her eyes that gives her away when she's telling the truth. And one of the times that they finally meet, it's in this like this nightclub of all the greens and pinks and you know blues of this movie that is frequently used. They kiss a little bit, and you're like, okay, I guess they're just trying to like put this movie in a certain time frame of now. Even though it's 1989. That being said, it happened, yeah, but you can kind of tell it was stamped in there, But nonetheless, it was interesting for sure. And then you end up having like a lesbian sex scene, which it's hard to really describe, except it happens in 30 seconds, and you're just like, wow, okay. And you don't know whether or not, like, what to do with yourself when you're watching it. You're just like, oh, I just saw that, and I don't know what to think about it. And obviously some would want to, like, shield their eyes, and that's the part I was talking about. And others, would probably enjoy it a little too much. But it's there, and it happens. But you kind of think that Charlize Theron is like manipulating this girl, to get her to come to her side or something like that, and then you find out that she actually starts to have affection and feelings for her. Now, this does have a pretty funny payoff though, because mind you, this is a flashback, and what's happening is that all these events are unfolding under the investigator's eyes. And a couple minutes after the sex scene happens, it cuts back to these inspectors or bosses or whatever, Goodman and Theron's boss, and their faces say everything. And it's great. This Percival guy, he's pretty crummy. He had picked up a list from this guy and this like Jewish guy. It's hard to tell. They kind of give him some Jewish stereotypes, but you don't know like just exactly what he is. It doesn't. I don't think it really matters. But his name's Spyglass. Yeah, okay. And he has the list memorized because he looked at it at one point. And when they try to get him out of the like East Berlin and the West Berlin, Percival turns and shoots him, and you realize that he's a pretty bad crosser, but and you think he's Satchel, and they even use the name Satchel, but then there's another, and then all this other stuff happened, and all the unfolding of all the of the kickassery that Charlize Theron's character has, which like I said is phenomenal. It cuts to the scene where they're all polished, and Charlize Theron's always been drinking Stoli vodka, so like the implications of having that Russian side to her, and you figure out that Charlize Theron is actually Satchel, the double agent, which I guess some people would have seen coming. I guess I was just too focused on Percival, the drunk hobo, to even think it was Charlize Theron's character. And then you have her all brushed up, and she's actually a brunette, even the movie's called Atomic Blonde, and most of the time she is blonde. There was like one other scene that she had like her like red hair, like for a scene, like in a movie theater. But they have this ending scene with this one Russian guy that had come up to her in one of the nicer bars, not like a dive or a nightclub or anything like that. Very slow paced, but regardless, they're in this ballroom, not ballroom, but like a very fancy, elegant room, and they're talking and whispering sweet nothings, and then she comes around and is just like, oh, no, of course I'm bad. I'm gonna kill you. And this whole scene unfolds, and you're like, okay, yeah, she's a double agent. And then you find out that her boss is actually John Goodman, even though she had been like really rude to him the entire time. And it's just like, oh, so she's hired by the American, and makes sure to act Russian with drinking her vodka and plays it up nice with the Russians, and then it all makes sense too, because you're thinking, oh, like this is the American angle, okay, it's American audience, it makes sense, okay, fine. So that happens. So in short, lesbian sex happens. A lot of kickassery happens, which is better. And she's a double agent with the American as the boss, played by John Goodman, which I guess makes sense because if you have like a big cameo, usually they have some, I don't know, some bigger role in store. So that was that. In terms of how this movie was, like, what I feel about it, while it's not while it's not gonna win any, I don't think it's gonna win any Oscars by any means. It's it's a spy thriller. It was, but it may win something like in the visual or stunts department, but that'd be about it. And that's a stretch, but it's enjoyable. It was really fun, and Charlize Theron is awesome, and just looking into all the things that they did for this movie, evaluating whether or not these stunts could be pulled off by her, and realistically, it was pretty sweet. She had a lot of different techniques that she used when she was, beating up the bad guys, and it was cool. The storyline could have been fleshed out a bit more, but it's hard. It's not that big of a deal. And yeah, I mean, if you have your sensibilities about, you know, cussing and nudity, you're not gonna like it. Um, but you probably already knew that. For me, it wasn't that big of a deal, but it was noticeable, more than usual, I would say. But all in all, it's a good film. Um, Probably as I watch more and more movies, I'll get a different idea of like what gets repeated and what doesn't. I think there are some things this movie probably lifted from elsewhere, but they weren't so in your face that you could tell. I couldn't anyway. Um, there were a couple of one-liners that Charlize Theron tried to pull, and they didn't work. But honestly, when she kept the dialogue to herself, kept those thoughts to herself and just kicked butt, spot on. So that is Atomic Blonde, and I'm gonna give it a B plus. And between that and Dunkirk, I definitely like this one more than Dunkirk. Um, but that's probably the personal preference. They both serve different purposes. So there you go. Well, I have to admit, I was excited about this movie for quite some time too. And we have some really exciting movies coming in the near future. We have The Dark Tower, which, is supposedly a sequel to all the books. Hi, I need to read all the books. It's, the Stephen King, my favorite. Um, we have Annabelle Creation, which I'm excited about that one too. And then there are some movies on like the best and worst list that I really want to get to. Trying to think. There's I have more good movies than bad movies usually. There's the Beast of Yucca Flats that I've been thinking about for a while. Mainly because I did Die Hard Dracula already now. Um, there's like the Die Hard movies. The Matrix movie is available on Amazon. Food Fight is available on Amazon, so it might actually be The Matrix and Food Fight in the near future. We'll see. I haven't decided officially, but I'll keep you posted. All right. So this was a lot of fun. I hope to keep doing these, and any support's appreciated. All right. I'll talk to you later. Bye.